Chapter 4:17. She was chasing He Honghua away. The shareholders all understood what he meant, and they all looked over. He Honghua glared at her. How dare you? Sister Honghua, I call you sister because I respect you. But if you don't want this respect, I can only ask the security guards to escort you out. Su Mei was pitiful. How can the shareholders' meeting be held if you yell at me like this? This is the company, not the countryside. If I don't ask you out, we can't continue. He Honghua was so angry that her chest hurt. I still have shares in the Fu family. Why can't I sit here? Yes, we all know you have shares. Su Mei pretended to be very reasonable. That's why I invited you to this shareholders' meeting. I've asked you many times to return the shares to Zhongyi. It's fine for us to buy them, but you always disagreed. Now that there are personnel decisions in the company, of course the major shareholders have the final say. The 25% shares are the tens of thousands of yuan that you took out when the company was first established. Sister Honghua, you can't always think that you can do whatever you want just because of a few tens of thousands of yuan. That won't do. All the old people who followed Fu Zhongyi knew that without the tens of thousands of yuan, the Fu family would be dead. But now, even this became Su Mei's topic of ridicule for He Honghua. No one could understand He Honghua's feelings. That kind of infuriating and sad pain made her breath tremble. The two shareholders couldn't stand it and wanted to say something. But Fu Zhongyi coughed coldly. This made them realize that it was no longer possible for Fu Zhongyi to remember their past kindness. Not only He Honghua, but even they seemed to have lost the right to speak. Su Mei was still talking. She raised her eyebrows and looked at He Honghua. The company really doesn't need you to create trouble. What are you waiting for, security guards? Ask her out, we have to continue the meeting. Yes. The two security guards rushed forward and grabbed He Honghua's arms. He Honghua's eyes were red. You are just his secretary, what right do you have to do this? And you, look carefully, I am the shareholder. The security guards had been here for a long time and they knew who was in charge of the company. They didn't even listen to He Honghua's words as they dragged her out. Just at this moment. Swoosh. Something rang out behind him. Subconsciously, they turned their heads back, and their calves were hit hard by the skateboard. It was so painful that the security guards almost immediately let go with a scream. He pulled the skateboard back. He returned to Fu Jiu's feet. She stood in front of the door, dressed in black. Her hair was like silver, and her eyes were filled with hostility. However, her voice was very calm. Who allowed you to touch my mother? 9. He Honghua was stunned. Everyone in the meeting room stood up because of this scene. Even Fu Ximing, who had been hiding in the small partition, couldn't help but rush out and look at Fu Jiu with disgust. Fu Zhongyi was even angrier. He didn't leave any face for Fu Jiu and blasted, "You wastrel, how dare you show up? Look at all the shameful things you've done. Chasing a man all over the school. All of you, scram. Take your mother with you." Chapter 4:18. Su Mei knew how to behave. She quickly grabbed Fu Zhongyi's arm and tried to calm him down. She said to Fu Jiu, "Your dad's health has always been poor, and you're still so mad at him. Everyone here is your elder. It's fine if you're rude, but you even brought a skateboard here to hurt people. This is not a place you should be. Auntie advises you to leave. Otherwise, it won't be good for you and your mom." Hearing that, Fu Jiu tilted her head and smiled. She stood in front of He Honghua and put one hand in her pocket. She looked down at Su Mei. "Since you're a secretary, you should just stand there and do your job. This is a conversation between the Fu family. It has nothing to do with you. You." Su Mei narrowed her eyes. Fu Zhou, how come you've become like your mother? You don't care about the occasion. I'll say it again, this is a shareholders' meeting. Fu Zhou interrupted her before she could finish. She was playing with a USB in her hand, and her voice was very calm. It is precisely because this is a shareholders' meeting that I am warning you to do your job as a secretary. Otherwise, get out of here. You unfilial son. Fu Zhongyi heard Fu Zhou's words and became even more ruthless. Call security. Call all the security guards downstairs. Do you think this is a place where you can cause trouble? Su Mei's face turned cold, and her eyes were filled with coldness. No one had ever told her to get out of here. This peasant bun, if she didn't teach him a lesson for a few days, he would forget who he was. He deserved to be kicked out. Refusing a toast only to be forced to drink a forfeit. How could the smart Fu Zhou not see through Su Mei's thoughts? But she acted as if she didn't see or hear Fu Zhongyi's words. She walked over to the long table in the conference room. Then, she reached out and knocked on the back of one of the chairs. That person was none other than Su Mei's younger brother, Su Xing. What do you want? Fu Zhou, what the hell do you want? Fu Ximing's arrogant little face was full of venom after seeing his actions. In contrast, Fu Zhou's expression was much more indifferent. I want to ask your uncle why he has the right to sit here. Fu Zhou. Su Mei said again, Su Xing is one of the shareholders of Fu's enterprise. You should call him Boss Su when you see him. You shouldn't talk to him like this. Yeah, how can you talk to President Su like that? That is to say, this Fu Zhou really followed He Honghua in death. No matter what, he was born in the countryside. Even if he is rich now, he can't change his bad habits. Luckily, Ximing is in the Fu's enterprise. The two shareholders looked at Fu Zhou with disapproval. They didn't have many shares in their hands, but they always defended the Su family. Su Xing also sneered, that's enough, Mr. He. Hurry up and leave with your brainless son. We don't want to always be a joke. Every time the shareholders' meeting was held, He Honghua would receive all kinds of ridicule. She would always clench her fists and tell herself that she had to endure for Zhou's sake. But now, Zhou was standing in front of her, that group of people. He Honghua couldn't stay any longer, not because she couldn't stand it, but because she was afraid that Zhou would be wronged. But just as she was about to reach out her hand. Chapter 419. The youth's voice was neither loud nor soft, and it had a unique magnetism to it. It was very nice, and it didn't sound like the country bumpkin Fu Zhou's voice at all. But it was just one sentence. This caused Su Xing's entire body to tremble, and even his expression to change. He, who was originally stained with the smell of alcohol, now looked a little shaky. Where was his previous steady appearance? Fu Zhou laughed, but her eyes were cold. It seems that CEO Su has remembered. You. Impossible, it can't be you. Su Xing's lips were pale. Su Mei immediately felt that something was wrong. What do you mean it can't be him? Ah Xing, what's going on? No. Nothing happened. Su Xing's gaze was evasive. Fu Zhou slowly pulled out the leather chair and sat in his previous seat. She looked at Su Mei and said 6 words handsomely, that's it. That was a seat that only shareholders were qualified to sit in. It couldn't be what she thought. How could this be? Ah Xing, say something. Su Mei couldn't hold it in any longer. Su Xing stuttered and didn't dare to look at her sister. Finally, she pointed at Fu Zhou angrily. You did it on purpose. You set me up, didn't you? Otherwise, how could I have lost so much that day? In the end, when he lost, he impulsively mortgaged his shares, just to get his money back. He wanted to mortgage it first and then redeem it, but he didn't expect that the other party wouldn't return the shares to him. Su Xing thought that the other party was dissatisfied with the price, so he planned to negotiate again today. How did this kid become the shareholder? Fu Jiu crossed her long legs, looking vaguely like a CEO. Boss Su, that's too much. Did I hold a gun and force you to gamble? You are the one who did not take the shares of Fu's enterprise seriously and mortgage them as you please. After all, your shares are different from my mother's. When President Fu established the Fu Corporation, 90% of the money was provided by my mother. Later, when the Fu Corporation was robbed, my mother took out her remaining money to finance the company and became one of the shareholders. At that time, the Fu Corporation was not worth much, and even if it was rotting on the street, no one would know. My mother was obviously trying to save people. At that time, there were two uncles who fought together with her. These people's shares were obtained with blood and hardship, so they cherished it even more. Even if one day they couldn't continue living because of a mistress, they wouldn't think of selling their shares. President Su's shares are different. Just because he has a third sister who is good at pillow talk, he obtained 15% of the Fu Corporation's shares. Of course he can mortgage something that he obtained so easily. You. Su Xing was so angry that his face turned red. Fu Zhongyi and Hisumei's faces darkened. Fu Jiu's words tore the faces of the three of them apart, both inside and outside. Chapter 420. But who said that a village girl was destined to be incapable? Capability could never be determined by education or family background. At that time, they were so focused on their work that they didn't notice it. By the time they realized it, it was already too late. Fu Zhongyi was determined to protect Su Mei. As small shareholders, they couldn't say anything. They thought the result this time would be the same as the previous years. But what they didn't expect was that there would be such a twist. In fact, even He Honghua herself was stunned. Joe, you asked me for money 2 days ago to buy shares. Yes. Fu Jiu chuckled. I bought it for you as a birthday present. What do you think, Mom? Are you satisfied with this birthday present? Of course, Fu Jiu wouldn't tell He Honghua that targeting Su Xing was a plan she had ever since she got her computer out of the hospital. But she had to wait for the right time. And the day she came back from Tokyo was the perfect time. Gamblers couldn't quit gambling for the rest of their lives. She and the Almighty used all the money they earned from clearing games to set up this trap. The Su family members who bullied He Honghua. How could she let them be free and unfettered? It was just that every mature hacker would leave no trace when they killed someone. Fu Jiu was the same. Her plan was meticulous. Every word she typed was a trap. That was her. Even Interpol couldn't do anything about it. Hacker Z. He Honghua looked at the youngster in front of her, and her eyes turned red. Birthday present. So this was how it was given. She was Joe, really, Mom likes it very much. He Honghua sniffled, and her cheeks were puffed up. Fu Jiu shook her finger. It can't be just this. As she spoke, she stretched out her hand and turned He Honghua's body to face Su Mei, who was standing opposite them. She raised her eyebrows handsomely and said, Mom, come on, let's play something more fun. Didn't the mistress just kick you out? Now use your status as a 40% shareholder to make her scram. Su Mei's face turned pale instantly. She clenched her fists. Fu Jiu, your mom doesn't have this right. She does. Fu Jiu's voice was calm. 40% shares is enough to kick a secretary like you out. Or do you want security to kick you out? Su Mei bit her lips tightly, as if this was the only way she could control her emotions, which were on the verge of losing control. She couldn't just go out like this. There were more than 100 employees in the Fu Corporation. If she left like this, how could she continue to stay in the Fu Corporation? Su Mei had no choice but to look at Fu Zhongyi with tears in her eyes. Fu Zhongyi's heart ached. He turned to Fu Jiu and said, "Who dares to touch the security guards? So what if I have 40% of the shares? Su Mei is my secretary, and I am the chairman. It's not just 40%. At this moment, the two old men who had been wanting to talk stood up and walked behind Fu Jiu. "And 5% of our total." In that instant, even Fu Zhongyi's expression changed. You guys, loyalty. One mustn't forget one's roots." Those were the exact words of one of them. But Fu Zhongyi didn't listen. He felt like he had been betrayed, and he looked at Fu Jiu in exasperation. "You've really grown up. If I knew that I would raise an ingrate like you, I might as well feed my money to the dogs." "Zhongyi, don't be angry." Su Mei was still pretending. Chapter 421. Boss Fu, you should keep your words to yourself. If my mom had known that she would raise an ingrate like you, forgetting about home after having a mistress, she wouldn't have taken out all her savings to let you start this company. President Fu, you're getting on in your years, and you've forgotten all about your past kindness. But it doesn't matter. You'll soon find out that not only can I kick your mistress out of the company, but I can also help my mother take back the company. Otherwise, how can I be worthy of you calling me an unfilial son? Fu Jiu was still as calm as ever, as calm as the clouds. Fu Jiu was still as calm as ever. You. Fu Zhongyi covered his chest with his hands, feeling all the blood rushing to his face. Fu Jiu wasn't worried about this scumbag. She put her fingers on He Honghua's shoulder again and smiled devilishly. "Come on, Mom, let's continue playing the game. I don't need you. I'll leave by myself." Su Mei knew that she had to leave even if she didn't want to. Her fingers were almost numb from her pinching, but there was nothing she could do. It was better to leave by herself than to be forced out by the security guards. But she didn't expect that she would be the one to be kicked out instead of He Honghua. This was a humiliation that Su Mei had never experienced before. However, the young man didn't seem to want to stop. "Secretary Su, how can you leave by yourself? Take your son and brother with you. We're having a shareholders' meeting, not a family banquet." Fu Ximing was about to explode when he heard this. "Who do you think you are? Who do you think you are?" Fu Jiu was still smiling, but she gave off an icy aura. "As a shareholder, I'm warning you to leave immediately." Fu Ximing still wanted to say more. Fu Jiu didn't waste time. She pressed the phone on the conference table. "Security, come in." Seeing this, Su Mei had to pull Fu Ximing over. "Mom, look at his arrogant face. I'm not leaving." "Why should we leave? Shut up." Su Mei growled. She looked at her baby son, took a deep breath, and said in a low voice, "If you don't leave, do you want the security guards to kick you out? You're the second young master of the Fu family. Even if you're kicked out, you have to walk out by yourself, understand?" Fu Ximing clenched his fingers. "I can't take this lying down." Not to mention Fu Ximing, how could Su Mei just swallow it? But couldn't she swallow it? This was a shareholders' meeting. Fu Jiu was a shareholder. Su Mei used to rely on this advantage, but she didn't expect that she would suffer a loss because of this. Because the commotion was too loud, and the door of the conference room was open, when the Su family's mother and son walked out, many employees looked in their direction, intentionally or unintentionally. That kind of gaze made Su Mei feel a burning pain on her face. She wished she could find a hole to hide in. This time, Su Shi and her son's arrogance was completely gone. Not only that, since the Fu family was involved in esports, there would definitely be some Spade fans. After seeing the young man, they were already very excited. Hearing the youngsters' words just now, a few of them seemed to have been injected with adrenaline, leaving dozens of comments online. You guys should really get to know this big spade. He's not only righteous, but also filial. He's a prince who protects his mother. At this moment, in the conference room. Chapter 422. How could Fu Zhongyi attend the next meeting? It was already good enough that he didn't need to take the pill. He was so angry that he was trembling. But Fu Zhongyi was a man who had gone through thick and thin. Soon, his eyes darkened and he looked at Fu Zhou. He didn't look like he was looking at his own child, but more like he was looking at his enemy, wishing he could cut off her flesh and remove her bones. Needless to say, the contents of the meeting were obvious. Even though Fu Zhongyi had the most shares, there were still a few small shareholders on his side. But the appointment of personnel in the company was no longer up to him. In the past, Fu Zhongyi had allowed Su Mei to kick He Honghua out of the company, leaving her with only the shares and not allowing her to show her face in the company. This was to completely remove He Honghua. But now, Fu Zhou was returning the favor. The illegitimate son wanted to be the general manager. As a shareholder, not only would she not agree, but she would also ban the illegitimate son's mother from the company. From that day onwards, the decision-making power of the Fu Corporation was no longer concentrated in Fu Zhongyi's hands. Everyone in the Fu Corporation knew that the huge change in the ownership of the Fu Corporation 10 years ago would probably happen again in another 10 years. The nouveau riche that they used to look down on actually made such a move. The two shareholders who had always supported the Su family didn't expect this. So when the meeting ended, they looked at Fu Zhou with unfriendly eyes. But Fu Zhou just stood there, dressed in black with silver hair. For some reason, she exuded a noble aura. This was simply the welfare of female employees. Did you see that? That's our young master from the Supreme Alliance. I heard he's really good. He's not just good, he's the FC King in Zone C. He's skilled and has a good character. The person who said this was definitely a fan of Spade Eye. Of course, there were still many people who didn't play games. But even so, looking at the youngster's demeanor and the way he held the skateboard, he was so handsome that they became his fangirl in a matter of minutes. Someone said, this person has changed a lot. He wasn't like this before. You guys were too far away and didn't hear it. Who knows who will be in charge of the Fu Corporation in the future? The employees couldn't be blamed for talking. After all, who would have thought that the youngster's side would play such a good card for such a big change? Just like that, He Honghua was still a little confused when she got into the car. But she also realized that her Zhou had changed a lot. It was a good thing that the child had become more mature, but, Zhou, tell me honestly, how many things are you hiding from me? He Honghua turned her head, her round face very serious. Fu Zhou's fingers paused, and she chuckled. Mom, why would I hide anything from you? Then why did you? He Honghua hadn't finished. Fu Zhou turned around and placed the skateboard in the back of the car. Brother Mo taught me. Almighty, I can only borrow it from you. Qin Mo. He Honghua's eyes widened. Him. Zhou, she said. Hua. He. He Zhou, she said, Fu, to say. Hua, she. And Hua. She is to say to was, and, but. She had thought. He Honghua thought it made sense, but she immediately retorted, my Zhou isn't stupid. Yes, she isn't. Fu Zhou replied. She took out her phone and sent a message. The message was about transferring money to the casino where the boss of the Su family went. Chapter 423. Fu Zhou replied, huh? It was obvious that she hadn't come back to her senses. He Honghua repeated, I say, Qin Mo is really nice to you. Fujio smiled and took back her phone. She said naturally, he's my brother, so it's natural for him to be nice to me. Yeah. He Honghua was an honest person, and she did whatever her Jiu said. Then let's invite Qin Mo to our house for dinner. We should thank him properly, or we wouldn't have such a good time, ha ha ha. He Honghua laughed heartily, just like herself. Fujio said, no need, I just treated him to a skewer 2 days ago. What if the Almighty's clothes burst when we invited him home? Fujio didn't want He Honghua to know that the Fujio of the past was gone. She was afraid that the other party would be sad. But Fujio also knew that the closer someone was to her, the more they would notice that she was different. So the Almighty couldn't come. But this time, He Honghua didn't listen to her Jiu. Child, how can your treat be the same as mine? Invite him over for a meal. Qin Mo is good-looking and sensible. I like him. Jojo didn't know what to say. Fujio had to praise her mom for having good taste. She also thought that the Almighty was good-looking and sensible, so she wanted to raise him. But it was too dangerous to raise him by force. Mom, Brother Mo is so busy with work, and he might not have time. Fujio wanted He Honghua to give up on this idea. He Honghua nodded. That's right, then call him first. I'll prepare when I have time, and if not, we can always invite him later. Okay. Fujio thought that she had finally gotten around it. But He Honghua still didn't drive and looked at her. Call him. Fujio raised her eyebrows. Now. Of course, He Honghua ordered. Fujio couldn't be too obvious, so she dialed the Almighty's number. She thought that she would hang up immediately after 3 rings. Anyway, she had to make a WeChat appointment to call the Almighty, so the chances of the call going through weren't high. But who would have thought that as soon as she had this thought, a deep and pleasant voice came from the other end. Hello. This. He picked up after 1 ring. Fujio glanced at He Honghua and saw that her eyes were shining. She said helplessly, Brother Mo, it's me. I know it's you. Qin Mo is sitting in the front passenger seat while Jiangshua is driving. Jiangshua didn't know whose phone call was so charming that it made the person beside him chuckle. Auntie is treating us. Qin Mo glanced at his watch. When is it? Fujio quickly said, it's 6 o'clock today. If you are busy, we can do it another day. Judging from the Almighty's tone, he must be busy. Not bad, let's avoid it like this. Qin Mo held onto his phone, his lips curved into a playful smile. You don't seem too willing for me to go. When Fujio heard this, He Honghua's face happened to lean over. Hearing this, she looked at her own child with a very disapproving gaze. Chapter 424. Jiangshua saw Qin Mo hang up the phone, turned the steering wheel, and raised his eyebrows. Who was it that made you so happy? Fujio. Qin Mo tilted his head and lit a cigarette. You guys have dinner, I'm going to the Fu family. Jiangshua agreed. He temporarily believed that Qin Mo didn't have any feelings for young Master Fu. After all, based on his understanding of Qin Mo, the other party had never been a person who could hold back. If Qin Mo really liked Fujio, he wouldn't hold back just because he was a boy. Besides, everyone in their circle knew how straight Qin Mo was. When they were in high school, a playful boy wanted to find a girl for Qin Mo. That night, there was a boy in the private room who was prettier than a girl. But in the end, they parted on bad terms. Qin Mo didn't object, but he didn't like it either. So, there shouldn't be anything to worry about. Jiangshua felt much more relaxed as he thought about this. He couldn't deny that Qin Mo was really nice to Fuzhou. But it was probably because he was a member of the Supreme Alliance. Since Qin Mo said that there wouldn't be anything, it meant that he knew what he was doing. For the National League. This brother of his was really attentive. Qin Mo was indeed attentive. The second visit was even more exaggerated than the first. He placed the gift boxes on the floor and said with a faint smile, "I came in a hurry the first 2 times, so I didn't bring anything for Auntie." He Honghua looked at the gifts on the floor and poked her Jio's back with her finger. Then she said to Qin Mo, "Just come, why did you bring anything? I'm still cooking soup, you guys talk first." Seeing her mother leave happily, Fuzhou said casually, "Brother Mo, every time you come to my house, it seems like you bring a dowry." Dowry? Qin Mo glanced at the youngster who was drinking water and said slowly, "Even if it's that kind of stuff, it's still a dowry." Hearing that, Fuzhou almost choked. "Brother Mo, I realized that you are more difficult to flirt with than when I first met you, what?" Qin Mo lifted his good-looking eyebrows, and in an instant, his black-bellied aura spread out. Fuzhou smiled faintly. "Nothing. Come on, have some fruit first." He Honghua came out of the kitchen in an apron. Qin Mo said, "Thank you." He looked noble and handsome. The more he Honghua looked at it, the more satisfied she was. If it wasn't for the fact that the Qin clan's conditions were too good, it was not bad to have such a son-in-law. No, no, no. What was she thinking? Qin Mo was too smart. It was naturally good to be friends. Lovers. Qin Mo probably didn't know she was a girl. In the future, all of this would be a lie, so it should be impossible for the two of them. The more he Honghua thought about it, the dimmer her eyes became. Her expression was no longer as happy as before. However, these thoughts were still hidden in her heart. When she finished all the dishes on the table and invited the 2 people on the sofa to eat, her face began to redden again. Before Fuzhou could respond, he Honghua had already said, "Qin Mo, Auntie thanks you for today's shareholder meeting." Shareholders meeting. Qin Mo held the wine glass in his hand and repeated the 4 words. He Honghua smiled and said, "Yes, I've heard about it from my Jiu. It's a good plan. You're really smart." Chapter 425. The voice sounded as if it was purposely ringing in her ears. She didn't need to think to know that the Almighty was waiting for her to settle the score. She suddenly felt that she should invite the Almighty to her house for dinner or something. What an incomparably huge pit. He Honghua was very happy. Which mother didn't want to hear someone compliment her child? The more she looked at him, the more she felt sorry for him. Throughout the meal, Qin Mo ate with dignity and elegance. His every move was like his temperament. He was like a prince. He Honghua finally understood what it meant to be born in a prestigious family. A man like this should be liked by many girls, no. Too many men that girls liked were unreliable. There were too many temptations out there. It seemed like they should just be friends. But Xiaodong had said, Qin Mo was the reason why her Jiu was addicted to games. Her Jiu wouldn't. He Honghua's eyes were filled with worry when she thought of this. She stood up and said, "Sit down, I'll get someone to brew some tea for you to digest." In fact, He Honghua didn't need to brew tea. She needed some time alone. He Honghua had never realized like today that her Jiu was already a big girl. She couldn't help but wonder if she had made the right decision back then. If she didn't want anything, her Jiu would be like any other girl now, able to fall in love with anyone without any scruples. But now, He Honghua didn't want to think about what she would have lost if she hadn't done that. She couldn't go back to her home in the countryside. All her money was invested in the Fu Corporation. He Honghua still hadn't forgotten the time when the doctor told her that her child had congenital asthma and had to be hospitalized. How she got through to that number. In a sense, He Honghua was even more loyal than the women in the city. She couldn't stand the fact that her man was with another man. The divorce papers had been written long ago. She used to be stubborn, thinking that she didn't want anything and would raise her Joe by herself. It didn't matter if her life was tough. She still had a pair of hands. She could still be a nanny. The words congenital asthma made her think of Fu Zhongyi. Fu Zhongyi was impatient at first, but when he heard that Joe was a boy, he immediately transferred the money. At that time, He Honghua knew that if she wanted her child to live a good life, she had to do this. Although He Honghua was from the countryside, she was a mother. She didn't want Fu Zhou to see her like this, so she didn't go out. This made it easier for the Almighty to interrogate someone. Now that I'm not here, you can talk about the shareholders' meeting slowly. Qin Mo sat on the sofa and looked at the youngster with deep eyes. His face was handsome. What scheme did I use? Fu Zhou knew that she couldn't escape this, so she simply explained the situation. You are lying. Qin Mo's voice was still calm. But Fu Zhou could still hear the disapproval in his voice. She smiled faintly. Sometimes, white lies are necessary. For example, the fact that she was a girl. It would not be good for anyone to say it out loud. As long as Madame Fu did not come back, she had to maintain this disguise. On one hand, it was a good move. On the other hand, it would prevent Fu Zhongyi from making a big deal out of this. But looking at the Almighty. Chapter 426. Fu Zhou's fingers paused at this thought. If the Almighty found out that she was hiding a lot of things from him, the consequences would not be good. Fu Zhou knew how smart Qin Mo was. She had said long ago that she did not want to be enemies with this person. However, it seemed like it would be up to the Almighty in the future whether they would become enemies or not. It wasn't that Fu Zhou hadn't thought about telling him that she was a girl. But in Tokyo, when she remembered that the Almighty was the mysterious person who had trapped her, she couldn't help but smile. Fu Zhou gave up on the idea. Furthermore, Fu Zhou narrowed her eyes. The Almighty didn't seem to like girls. Once the Almighty found out that she was a girl, she couldn't rule out the possibility that he would link her operation to Z's. Then she would be in danger. He couldn't reveal his identity. You have to dress. Only after everything was settled and they left this place would they be able to do so. Qin Mo's gaze swept over the youngster who had suddenly quietened down. He tilted his head and used the tone of an older brother. What? You don't even allow me to say it. The wall-jumping genius. Those last 4 words. Fu Zhou looked up, looking rather handsome. Brother Mo, let's discuss something. Qin Mo lifted his eyes. What? Can you stop calling me a bookworm? Adding on the word, climbing over the wall, it was too vicious. Don't think that she couldn't tell. Qin Mo looked at the youngster's expression and curled his lips into a smile. He reached out his hand and flicked Fu Zhou's forehead. In a good mood, he said, no. The corner of Fu Zhou's mouth twitched. How could he be so unreasonable? Didn't he say that he would give in to his little brother? Qin Mo really liked to see the youngster's downcast expression because he knew that he was the only one who could see the youngster's adorable expression. As for the girls, Qin Mo narrowed his eyes. After the incident with the Cali team. In the future, if anyone tried to get close to the youth, he would check carefully. Since it was his younger brother, of course, he had to protect him well. Women had too many thoughts. In the past, Qin Mo didn't think so. He wasn't sure if every elder brother who had a younger brother was like this. However, there was one thing that was common. No elder brother would wish for anyone with ulterior motives to get close to their younger brother. Qin Mo was the same. However, based on his current understanding of the youngster, it was impossible for him to win. This fellow's ability to cause harm and provoke others was top-notch. Thus, he maintained his posture and added in a flat voice, "Since you're using me as a shield, you should at least give me some compensation. Brother Mo, we are brothers. Talking about compensation hurts our relationship." Fu Jiu raised her arm and moved closer to him. Qin Mo remained seated, his brows slightly arched as he pinched the youngster's chin. Chapter 427. Suddenly, Qin Mo's eyes darkened uncontrollably. He turned his head and looked at the youngster. Fu Jiu didn't understand. She didn't blow into the Almighty's ear, so why was the Almighty giving her a warning look? Fu Jiu thought it was a warning. However, in He Honghua's eyes, such a scene was not the case. He Honghua was still holding the teacup. Her body trembled, and she almost threw the tea set away. In the end, she took a deep breath and retreated. Seeing that her Jiu and Qin Mo were fine, she found a chance to speak through the wall. "Jiu, come here, I have too many things here to take out," He Honghua shouted. Qin Mo retracted his gaze, and his voice was very calm. "Auntie is calling you, hurry up. We can talk about the payment later." Fu Jiu, the Almighty was indeed a cunning businessman. If she had known earlier, she would have thought of another reason. She didn't expect her mother to do this. Fu Jiu sighed in her heart. When she stood up again, she was already indolent. She would deal with whatever came her way. She could owe the Almighty for the payment. She was too young. This was the best thing Fu Jiu had done since her rebirth. Every time the Almighty said he would teach her a lesson, he wouldn't go overboard. After all, the Almighty also said that he would give in to his little brother. Thinking of this, Fu Jiu's thin lips curled into a smile. Strangely, there was nothing to take from the kitchen. He Honghua looked at the youngster who walked in with one hand in his pocket. She pulled her Jiu to the side. "Jiu, what's going on between you and Qin Mo?" Fu Jiu understood instantly. It was just an excuse to go into the kitchen to take things. Her mother wanted to whisper to her, but He Honghua was too anxious. Before Fu Jiu could reply, she said her second sentence with a heavy heart. "I heard from Xiaodong that you play games because of Qin Mo Jiu, is that true?" Her second sentence came out with a heavy heart. Fu Jiu didn't know how to answer this question. If she started playing games to earn money, destroy that mistress, and take back the Fu family, then she wouldn't be able to explain the shareholders' meeting today. Fu Jiu was a person who didn't like to lie. This was because once a lie was made, it had to rely on many lies to cover it up. However, she had to avoid anything that would make He Honghua suspicious of her. Some things, if known, would only add to one's sorrow. However, Fu Jiu didn't intend to continue lying. She chuckled and did not answer. Instead, she asked, "Mom, why do you suddenly want to ask me this?" "I'm afraid." He Honghua raised her voice and then lowered it again. But even so, it attracted Qin Mo's attention from the sofa. He stood up without the two of them knowing, thinking that Fu Jiu couldn't carry everything by herself. He Honghua continued to whisper, "I'm just afraid that you'll fall in love with him. You're all grown up now, and you might not be able to control your feelings." "I understand that, but I have something to tell you. The Qin family standards are too high. Wait until I earn enough money to be on par with them. If you think about this again, I'm afraid that you'll get hurt." Fu Jiu laughed. "Mom, what are you thinking? Brother Mo and I are just good friends." "Really?" He Honghua's eyes lit up. "You don't like him?" Fu Jiu answered subconsciously, "No." Chapter 428. As smart as Fujio was, she quickly realized something. Her heart skipped a beat. There was only one word: it was over. She turned around and her eyes met the Almighty's. His eyes were a little cold, but there was more depth and something Fujio couldn't see through. She didn't know how long the Almighty had been here. He just looked at her with his hands in his pockets. It seemed like he had heard the conversation between her and her mother. This situation was really awkward. After all, no friend was willing to be a guest. She heard her mother ask her son if he liked that guy. It didn't match his gender. Besides, the Almighty was so straight. He probably couldn't accept such a joke. But that wasn't the most important thing. If the Almighty didn't hear it, her "I don't like him" would be too hurtful. Fujio was worried that the Almighty would misunderstand, so she explained, "Brother Mo, my mother said that I like you, not friends. Don't misunderstand, I'm just proving that I don't have any improper thoughts about you." Really? Chin Mo's voice didn't show any emotion. He was always cold and dignified, like the cool grass on a hazy day. Fujio nodded, and to prove that she wasn't lying, she added, "Of course, if it was between friends, how could I say that I don't like him?" Chin Mo smiled, but there wasn't much warmth in his eyes. It was just that the subtle feeling was hidden too deep. To prevent He Honghua from being too embarrassed, he pulled the youngster over. "Since there's nothing for you to do here, send me out." Fujio raised her eyebrows. "Not going to drink tea?" Chin Mo's handsome face was dignified. "There's a meeting tomorrow morning." "Okay." Fujio also felt that the current situation wasn't suitable for further discussion. It would be better to sleep tomorrow and forget about the awkwardness. Chin Mo was indeed well educated. Even when he was leaving, he didn't forget to say goodbye to He Honghua. From the Fu family's villa to the main gate, the two didn't speak on the way. But when Chin Mo sat in the car, he could still see the silver-haired youngster standing outside the window with a hint of coldness in his eyes. The pure black Hummer wasn't slow. Soon, Chin Mo entered the military compound. A call came from Feng Yi, saying that the incident on the internet was a blessing in disguise. Now, there were more people supporting Supreme Alliance. It's all thanks to Yao Yao for being the first one to stand up and send voice support. Sometimes, even doing good deeds requires a leader. Little Spade's kindness to this girl wasn't in vain. If it wasn't for their appearances, I would have thought they were dating. The Weibo group was filled with Supreme Alliance's hot comments, and even the media made the following comments. Supreme Alliance isn't just passionate about esports, it's also about the relationship between them. Youth doesn't care about winning or losing, it's about who's with you. Chin Mo listened to Feng Yi's words. He pulled open his collar with one hand and tilted his head to light a cigarette. His arm was casually placed on the sofa, his fingers playing with the limited edition silver Zippo lighter. His dark black hair was a little messy. In fact, he was a little absent-minded. He didn't even listen to Feng Yi's words carefully. The reason for this was that the conversation was still lingering in his mind. "Mom, what are you thinking? Brother Mo and I are just good friends." "Really? You don't like him?" Chapter 429. You don't like it? Chin Mo couldn't help but frown. Somehow, his eyes turned cold. But the youngster wasn't wrong. The two of them were friends, nothing else. Both he and the youngster thought so. But Chin Mo suddenly realized that he didn't like the tone the youngster used when he talked about him. He only treated him as an ordinary friend. Because in his heart, that guy was special. Of course, he would pamper his little brother a lot. People were like that. They treated others as important and hoped that person would give them the same thing. Special treatment and attention. All this time, he thought he got it. The youngster's special treatment. After all, the youngster was always different in front of him than in front of others. But now, Qin Mo felt that he seemed to have misunderstood. Just like what Feng Yi said on the phone. The youngster treated everyone very well. That seemed to be his quality. Maybe under circumstances where he didn't know, the youngster would show more expressions in front of Shui Yaoyao. After all, he had seen how the youngster protected Shui Yaoyao. This realization made Qin Mo feel a little unreconciled. Even at this moment, he was still expressionless and handsome. But his heart was far from being so calm. It was hard to accept. Qin Mo's slender fingers flicked the cigarette butt. A strand of black hair fell down, adding a sense of danger to his sense of abstinence. His face hidden in the darkness, no emotions could be seen. But that posture seemed to make people feel a little lonely for no reason. Outside the window, the night was getting darker. In the fog, the French window reflected the lights of the whole city, the man's slender figure, like a vampire aristocrat, mysteriously saying something. The next day. There was only one day left before the National League. People who didn't play sports couldn't understand that kind of excitement. The overwhelming publicity was not only on the computer, but also on the Hero mobile app. As long as one logged in, they could see the 24-hour countdown for the National League. The battle order was out. The official Weibo account was bustling with activity. But Shui Yaoyao was calm. The older generation didn't understand esports. In their eyes, it was asterisk asterisk asterisk. Yo, you're going out again. An auntie who was sitting in the yard picking vegetables saw Shui Yaoyao come out and pouted. Yaoyao, we're a family. What we said was for your own good. You should think about it. It's not good to keep doing this, right? Shui Yaoyao didn't say anything. She had asked around when she was wearing the Supreme Alliance's uniform. She didn't want to hear this. I know you don't like what I say, but I have no choice. Someone has to talk to you. Your mom is a newlywed, and I heard that the one she married isn't bad. I don't know the details, but if you want to be considerate of your mom, you should know your place. Maybe one day your mom will get a refund. Otherwise, why would she leave you here alone? It must be that the family can't accept you. If you ask me, your mom is quite a troublemaker. She's already so old, but why can't she stand the loneliness? That's the attitude again. You know the condition of your family, don't daydream all the time. I know you don't like what I say, but I have no choice. Chapter 430. Hey! That auntie couldn't take it anymore and shouted, my neighbors, come and see what kind of child she is. How can she talk like that? It's okay that she's fat, but I tried to persuade her, but she was so rude and unreasonable. Dream? Playing games is considered a dream. As soon as she said that, some people started to support her and craned their necks to look over. The eldest daughter of the Shui family is really getting worse and worse. I know, Mom. She used to volunteer to help our school's senior Jiang with his homework, and she fantasized about doing something with him. In the end, he was still scared away by her. She didn't even look at herself and dared to dream about others. It's the same now. She fantasizes about how good she is at playing games all day. Don't worry about her. How can a person like her have any future? Listening to the voices of discussion coming from all directions, Yi Zichen's eyes lit up. Shui Yaoyao tightened her grip on the strap of her bag and didn't look back. She just wanted to stick to what she wanted. No matter what others said. She didn't care if she had any future. She had to go back to the national competition. Because only after the national competition, no one would say that it was just a dream. 10:45 p.m. Qin Group Building. Feng Yi kept raising his hand to look at the time on his watch. Why isn't she here yet? Obviously, he was a little anxious. Because they had to get to Lin City before 5 p.m. to participate in the regional registration. Otherwise, the neighborhood committee of the national competition would deem them as giving up automatically. Actually, the time didn't matter. But the reason why they didn't enter the top 4 last year. It was because of the day of the regional registration. When Almighty Qin appeared, there was still blood on his fingers. That was why Feng Yi had such a big reaction. Moreover, a girl didn't come this time. Feng Yi was even more worried. He stood there and paced back and forth. The other members were all on the commercial bus, including Qin Mo. But it was obvious that everyone in the team noticed that their captain seemed to be a little different today. But what exactly was different? They couldn't figure it out at the moment. The main reason was probably because Shui Yaoyao didn't appear, which distracted their attention. Especially Fu Jiu. She was still wearing a pure black anti-smog mask and looked out of the car window. When she saw Feng Yi raise his hand to look at his watch, she pulled her finger and jumped out of the car. She smiled and said lightly, "CEO Feng, you guys go first. I'll go find her. After that, I'll meet you in Lin City. She should be caught up with something. According to Yao Yao's personality, she won't be so unpunctual." Feng Yi thought about it. Let's wait for another 3 minutes. If she isn't here in 3 minutes, we need all the team members to be here. Otherwise, Qin Mo wouldn't have missed the best treatment time. Fu Jiu could hear the importance of this matter from Feng Yi's mouth. With one hand in her pocket, her eyes couldn't help but sink. Qin Mo, who was sitting in the car, looked at the youngster's side profile through the window. Qin Mo's expression didn't change at all, as if there was nothing in his eyes. But upon closer inspection, Qin Mo's eyes had never left the youngster since Fu Jiu got out of the car. That kind of deep and indifferent gaze and that kind of indifferent and noble sitting posture. Chapter 431. Just when Qin Mo was about to retract his attention, the youngster's eyes had a very obvious change. That kind of surprise couldn't be deceived. It was as if something like fireworks were blooming in his eyes. He was full of energy and was very handsome. He saw with his own eyes that the youngster took a step forward and held on to the person who came. Just like that, Shui Yaoyao's figure also came into view. Sorry, something happened on the way. Shui Yaoyao's hair was messy because when she walked forward, someone actually tried to hold her back. That auntie was really weird. She insisted on being reasonable, or she wouldn't let her go. Shui Yaoyao was in a hurry, so she was panting and didn't notice that there was a cut on her face. It looked like it was made by a fingernail. Fu Jiu had one hand in her pocket, and the other hand touched her face. Shui Yaoyao dodged in pain. Suddenly, Fu Jiu's eyes turned a little dark, and she gave people a much more dangerous feeling. But she didn't show it too much. Instead, she said faintly, "Get in the car first, we'll talk." Okay. Shui Yaoyao didn't think it was a big deal, as long as she made it in time. But she didn't know that in Qin Mo's eyes, this scene had slowed down a lot. Just like what he thought yesterday. He had always thought that he was the most special to the youngster. But now it seemed, he wasn't the only one who could affect the youngster's emotions. Something seemed to be pressing down on his chest, forcing him to close his eyes. Coco's feeling was the most obvious. Captain's low pressure seemed to be accompanied by cold air. And, had he regained his status as the Supreme Alliance's most beloved? Otherwise, why would the captain agree to let him sit next to him today? And not with Spade Z. Coco secretly looked at his captain's side profile. Some people were like this. It was clearly the same uniform. When he wore it, girls would say, "So cute, I want to take him home and raise him. When he wore it, he looked like a noble from a comic book. But the coldness was too strong. He wanted to swap seats with Spade Z. Spade Z wasn't afraid of the captain anyway. But when he thought of this, the best time had passed. The car started. Fu Jiao and Shui Yao Yao sat together. The wound on your face. What happened? Fu Jiao glanced at her phone, and her eyes darkened. Shui Yao Yao knew that the young man was concerned about her, so she smiled and shook her head. Ever since the internet incident, Shui Yao Yao understood that because of Spade Z's rapid rise to fame, the youngster was bound to be under extraordinary pressure. It wasn't that easy. She didn't want to trouble him with her matters. He wasn't being polite. Instead, she had to learn to handle her own affairs. In this way, she would be able to help His Highness Jiao. How could someone as smart as Fu Jiao not know what this silly girl was thinking? She said, "Okay." He raised his hand and poked her soft face with a smile. His face was gentle and his voice was pleasant. "Tell me when you want to say it." In fact, the conversation between the two of them wasn't loud at all. In fact, it was very soft. But in Qin Mo's ears, the sound seemed to have been amplified many times and there was even an echo. Chapter 432. Coco's body stiffened. He shouldn't mention anything about changing seats. Captain's gaze was as though he wanted to kill Spade Z. How did a certain someone provoke the captain? Coco tried his best to reduce his presence while looking back and forth. In the end, he didn't even dare to sleep, biting the rabbit's ear with his teeth. He felt like Captain was going to turn black. What should he do? In fact, Qin Mo didn't do anything. Compared to when he first met the youngster, he did whatever he wanted. Qin Mo's emotions now were completely different from before. He even had the urge to throw a tantrum. "Since I'm not special to you, then you're not that special in front of me, right?" But when he thought about it, he would remember the youngster's appearance in Tokyo because of him. That fierceness in protecting him was pleasing to the eye no matter how he looked at it. But why couldn't he be the most special one? Qin Mo didn't realize the situation he was in at all. This situation made him realize that not everything in this world could be planned out by him. Even if he closed his eyes, the image of the youngster rubbing the girl's head seemed to be swaying in front of him. That image was indeed dazzling. Fu Jiao was also looking at the Almighty. In fact, after yesterday's awkwardness, she had been looking for a chance to talk to the Almighty again. But as soon as they got in the car, the Almighty was already sitting next to Coco. Fu Jiao paused for a moment. She was smart enough to realize that now was not a good time to talk. Wait until they reached the hotel. With this thought in mind, after more than 3 hours of driving, they finally arrived at Linqing. As the provincial capital, it was the registration point for the national competition. Many famous teams could be seen here. There were also reporters and media who were already stationed there. That kind of scene, with the esports competition banner and cosplay actors standing outside, made people feel hot. It was the first time Shui Yao Yao and Feng Shang came to this place. Besides being shocked, even their fingertips were a little numb. Was this the national competition? So this was what the national competition looked like. Games were always inseparable from online voice actors. When the deep and pleasant voice sounded, Shui Yao Yao and Feng Shang felt as if they were in the scene of Hero. It was very dreamy. That voice is... Feng Shang stuttered. All the lines spoken by his character in the game were recorded by this person. Feng Yi chuckled at the side. Don't joke around. That person is a god-level voice actor with a lot of fans. While they're still here, hurry and enter the venue. If anyone sees young Master Qin, I'll have to act as a temporary security guard. The Almighty's popularity was undoubtedly the highest among them. At this point, it had nothing to do with skill. It was all about looks. He was different from Feng Shang. The other members of the Supreme Alliance had been here more than once. But every time, it was filled with regret. For example, Lin Feng and Yun Hu. Esports did depend on one's age in some aspects. They were playing well now, but they didn't know what would happen next year. Moreover, everyone in the Supreme Alliance knew that their captain couldn't stay in the team forever. After all, he was the president of the Qin group. This year was undoubtedly their last chance. Chapter 433. There was a special hall in the building to welcome every participating team. Hence, the people inside weren't as good as the people outside. When the Supreme Alliance members walked in, some people couldn't help but turn back. However, they weren't looking at Supreme Alliance. They were looking at Qin Mo's Supreme Alliance wasn't weak but compared to the Supreme Alliance team. Qin Mo, who had suppressed Xiangnan's captain, was the most interesting. The most valuable esports player. This was the title that almost everyone hoped to obtain. But Supreme Alliance wasn't the national champion team. But the title of the most valuable esports player landed on Qin Mo. In fact, even Feng Yi was shocked. Back then, when the news was announced, he had revealed a look of disbelief. How good was a player to be able to be the most valuable esports player? Was it just based on the number of kills? No. It wasn't just that. The most valuable esports player not only had good skills but also the ability to lead the team. Many people said that it could raise the team's ability to a higher level. That was something only Qin Mo could do. Hence, when he entered, many people were sizing him up and whispering among themselves. Did you see that? That's Qin Mo, the person with the most MVP awards. That was in the past, it might not be the case now. Last year, Supreme Alliance didn't even win the preliminaries. Ever since that time, Qin Mo rarely came out to do publicity. Recently, I've only heard of him playing in the wilderness. Could it be that his ability has declined? He doesn't dare to show his face. It's possible. It's also possible that his hand injury hasn't healed yet. But no matter what, it won't be that easy for him to win this year's MVP. Don't forget that there's a god in the regionals. Once they entered, they could smell the intense smell of gunpowder. This was a situation that could be encountered in other large-scale competitions besides the esports arena. As the Supreme Alliance took their seats, the atmosphere in the stadium seemed to heat up again. Even the shoutcaster paused when he saw Qin Mo very quickly. He resumed his deep voice. Teams that haven't confirmed their registration will be represented by their captains. Come here and fill out the form. Teams that have confirmed their registration, stay where you are. In such an occasion, order was important. However, there were more than 10 captains who went over to fill in the form. Every captain's aura was forcefully suppressed by Qin Mo. The commentator looked at the form in his hand and adjusted the microphone's position. Now, let's welcome the champions of last year's regional competition, which is also the top 4 in the country, the Yunzhong team, to read out the rules of the competition. Let's welcome them with a round of applause. That was the form. Fu Jiu sat in her seat. Chapter 434. Fu Jiu ignored him and was very indifferent. It was probably because of this attitude that the opposing team members sneered. That person still had a lazy look on his face. After saying that, he continued to walk forward. The last member of the Yunzhong team was not someone else. It was Fu Shiming, who had a good relationship with the members of the Yunzhong team. When he passed by Fu Jiu, there was arrogance in his eyes, as if he was saying, "So what if you entered the Supreme Alliance?" The champion of the regional competition is not the Supreme Alliance, but the Linqing Yunzhong team. The reason why Fu Ximing appeared like this was to tell this bumpkin not to think that he was really different from before just because he had some skills and seized his uncle's shares. This was nothing. In the esports selection contest, the reason why he lost to this bumpkin was that his teammates were not good enough. Now it was different. Lin Cheng Yunzhong, the top 4 in the country. Even the Supreme Alliance with young Master Qin might not be able to resist them. After all, young Master Qin's hand was injured. Coupled with the secret training during this period of time, they had developed a set of countermeasures for Spade Z's playing style. No matter how good Spade Z was, he was only good at killing people. Once it was a team competition, the 3 of them could surround him. This was Fu Ximing's idea. And the captain of the Yunzhong team, Ling Xiao, had a playful look on his face. He really didn't realize that the youngster who had some feelings for him before was really different from before. That gay from before would blush whenever he saw him. It was very obvious. The Ling family and the Fu family were business partners. At that time, he wanted to play with the other party. He didn't expect that person to be so smart. Whatever he asked him to do, that trash would do it. It was only fun to play with him for a day or 2. He didn't like men, and he wouldn't touch that guy. He just simply enjoyed that kind of gaze. After a long time, he would also feel disgusted. Naturally, he looked down on Fu Jiu. But Ling Xiao was very interested in Spade Z from the beginning, and he even thought of ways to find this person to let him join the Yunzhong team. Since he knew that Fu Jiu was Spade Z, Ling Xiao found it interesting. It seemed that he had to pick up the old toy and play with it again. With this thought in mind, Ling Xiao led the 8 official members of the Yunzhong squad to the center of the auditorium. That was an honor only given to the regional champion. The members of the Yunzhong battle team weren't short either. After all, they were a battle team that purely aimed to make profits. Of course, they would pay more attention to this when it came to selecting members. Therefore, when they stood there, there was indeed a considerable effect. It seems like Yunzhong's momentum is also very strong this year. That's right. You didn't know last year, but we were almost beaten up by them. He wasn't there for the battle between Yunzhong and Supreme Alliance, right? It's probably useless. With his hands injured, he won't be able to defeat Ling Xiao. When the whispers started, the members of the Yunzhong battle team began to read the rules one by one. In order to record this scene, even the cameras were all aimed at the members of the Yunzhong battle team. The members of the Yunzhong team gave off the feeling that they were standing at the top. In fact, they really felt that they were at the top. Chapter 435. Once people stood in a high position, they would become arrogant. The Yunzhong team was the best example. After the registration, the organizing committee took the form and went to the top floor. All the major teams would return to the hotel to rest so that they could be in the best condition for tomorrow's competition. But when the Supreme Alliance stood up, they happened to come face to face with the Yunzhong team. They met on a narrow path. The atmosphere in the venue changed. The people from the other battle teams looked at this scene with different expressions. The surrounding noise suddenly quieted down. Everyone seemed to be looking at Lin Xiao and Qin Mo's side profile. Their eyes looked back and forth between the 2 captains, as if they were evaluating who was better. One path, 2 teams, and no one had the intention to give way. The difference was that the Yunzhong team's members had obvious pride on their faces. The Supreme Alliance's members were no different from usual. The reporter looked at the scene in the camera and couldn't help but say to himself, so handsome. Indeed handsome. Let's not talk about whether the Supreme Alliance's skills were better than the Yunzhong team. Just from the looks alone, the Supreme Alliance was like a concentration camp for handsome men. Qin Mo and Fu Jiu didn't need to be mentioned. Both of them had the makings of an idol superstar. Their nobility was beyond the reach of ordinary people. Looking at Lin Feng and Yun Hu, the former was praised more than the girls in some teams. The latter came from a military compound, with a tall and strong body. Yin Wuyao had a cigarette in his mouth. His nose bridge was high, and he had the handsome face of a middle-aged uncle. Coco was holding a plush rabbit in his hands. Standing next to Feng Shang, who had the same temperament, he was so youthful that he could make a bunch of Andy fans scream. These people were all wearing the same uniform, led by Qin Mo. In terms of appearance, they had already surpassed the Yunzhong team. Or maybe it was because of this. The members of the Yunzhong team didn't like the Supreme Alliance. They were the champions of the regional competition, so why did Supreme Alliance receive more attention than them? This dissatisfaction became more and more obvious as the two teams brushed past each other. Especially when a tall man touched Lin Feng's shoulder, he sneered and spat out, "Loser." Qin Mo wasn't there that year. Yun Hu was the temporary captain. During the team competition, because of Lin Feng's loss, they didn't make it to the top 4 of the National League. This matter had always been a thorn in Lin Feng's heart. The person who spoke was the player who had killed Lin Feng back then. Lin Feng stopped in his tracks. The player and the teammate next to him laughed. "Angry? Don't be angry yet. The competition hasn't started yet. You'll be even angrier tomorrow." Apart from showing his face in front of the public during the selection contest, the rest of the time, he was only seen in the game. As the rookie king of Zone C, he was extremely popular. Some of the older pro players weren't even as hot of a topic as him. Thus, when Ling Zhao's confession came out, all the reporters' eyes lit up. This kind of explosive news would definitely be the headline apart from the start of the competition. Chapter 437. Unexpectedly, the young man just smiled and said casually, "I've confessed to at least 10 people in school, so I have to ask, who are you? Who are you? Who are you?" In the camera, Ling Zhao's smiling face froze. Feng Shang saw this and couldn't help but laugh out loud. Wng Lei, who was behind Ling Zhao, was instantly enraged. "Are you pretending not to know our captain? Have you forgotten how you treated our captain?" Fu Jiu's eyes swept over him indifferently, and she curled her lips into a smile. She sounded apologetic, but the words that came out of her mouth angered him to the core. "Sorry, I usually don't have any impression of people who aren't that outstanding." You. Wng Lei didn't expect this person to be so shameless. She even pretended to have amnesia and denied what she had done. Fu Jiu didn't think she was shameless. She had confessed to so many people in the past. Did she have to remember them one by one? It wasn't a waste of brain cells. But, why did she confess to so many people? This Ling Xiao was one of them. If he hadn't mentioned it today, she would have forgotten about it. Or it could be said that this body didn't want to remember subconsciously. She didn't know what the other party had done to make this body want to forget and feel pain in its heart. But Z was Z after all. Since he didn't come with good intentions, she couldn't let him escape unscathed. Ling Xiao smiled again after the embarrassment. He lowered his eyes and said, "You're much smarter now. You don't know me. Ha! Then let's see how you behave later." A gay pretending to be straight. After saying this, Ling Xiao was about to leave. But at this moment, Qin Mo opened his mouth. His handsome side profile didn't show any emotion, only coldness and nobility. "If he is really a gay, how do you think he will behave with me around?" Suddenly, Ling Zhao's face froze again. Because Qin Mo was so much better than Ling Xiao in all aspects. They weren't on the same level at all. Just as Qin Mo had said, any gay with eyes would definitely choose Qin Mo when placed in front of these two people. Qin Mo's type was really attractive to both men and women. Therefore, Ling Zhao's current behavior was indeed a little awkward. Mo Jiao and Mo Jiao were an official couple. Who would give up someone like Almighty Qin for someone else? No one was blind. But from what Almighty Qin said, it seemed like Spadesy wasn't interested in him, let alone others. Did that mean that Spadesy wasn't gay? All the information on the internet was defaming him, was that so? It had to be said that Qin Mo's words were powerful. Not only did it slap Ling Xiao in the face, but it also removed the long-lasting black mark on Spadesy. When the members of the other teams looked at the young man again, they did not look at him with such inquisitive gazes. The reporters naturally did not dare to write any more nonsense. Ling Xiao sneered and left the venue with the Yunzhong team. Before he left, he took another look at Fu Jiao. Those who knew Fu Jiao well knew that the youngster had confessed to someone, which was why Qin Mo had turned to look at the youngster. How many more? Qin Mo's voice was faint. At first, Fu Jiao didn't know that the Almighty was asking her. After she realized it, she said, "What?" Chapter 438. Fu Jiao's back stiffened. She really didn't expect the Almighty to ask such a question. Didn't the Almighty care about the occasion when he asked this kind of question? Even though the people from the Yunzhong team and the reporters had left, there were only Supreme Alliance members around. But, how should she put it? She seemed to have taken a liking to anyone with a little bit of good looks. It was like this in her memory. It was obvious that Qin Mo wasn't going to let the youngster escape this question. He raised his eyebrows in a dignified manner. Fu Jiao touched the bridge of her nose and said vaguely, "Not many." "How many are there if not a few?" Qin Mo glanced over. Fu Jiao didn't say anything. Lin Feng loved this kind of commotion the most. He began to interrogate him. "You said there were at least 8 if not 10. Could it be 9? Fu Jiao still didn't speak. Lin Feng laughed. "That can't be. You want more?" "A dozen." Fu Jiao gave him a look that meant for him to shut up. Lin Feng was shocked. "Don't tell me there are more than 20. With every increase in the number, Qin Mo's face grew colder. Fu Jiao saw that there was no way out, so she simply admitted, "Who hasn't been young? Didn't you confess to someone?" This question was directed at Lin Feng. Lin Feng straightened his back and patted his chest. "How can that be the same? Brother always confesses to girls. What about you, Ling Xiao? F***ck, how did you fall for him?" "How would I know?" This was Fu Jiao's true reaction. She really didn't know why Fu Jiao liked Ling Xiao. Lin Feng pointed at the young man and laughed. "You're shy. You're definitely shy. Fu Jiao. Shy your ass. Didn't you see how dark the Almighty's face was? Can't you change the subject?" Lin Feng clearly didn't realize this. He rubbed his chin and said, "Do you think you'll go easy on me tomorrow?" "Don't worry, I won't. I'll kill him." In order to stop the Almighty from releasing any more cold air, Fu Jiao even said some harsh words. Who would have thought that Lin Feng would act like an experienced person? He shook his head and let out a long sigh. This is hatred born from love. Big brother understands, big brother understands. "Fu Jiao, someone come and take him away, will you?" Just like that, the topic of conversation never left Fu Jiao. The members of Supreme Alliance were different from ordinary people. After all this happened, they didn't even care about why Fu Jiao confessed to a boy. It was something else. Little Spade. We've been wanting to ask this for a long time. It's fine if you confess to others, but how did you have the guts to confess to Captain? After hearing this question, Fujio subconsciously glanced at the tall and straight figure walking in front of her. It was because of the awkward situation at the Fu family yesterday. And now, Fujio felt that she had to explain. It's a misunderstanding. Misunderstanding? Lin Feng raised his eyebrows. Chapter 439. All of a sudden, all the Supreme Alliance members froze in their tracks. Not only players like Lin Feng, but even Yin Wuyao, who had a cigarette in his mouth, was dumbfounded. Sleep. Sleep. Involuntarily, everyone's eyes turned to the other party in the next second. Fujio choked on the Almighty's question and started coughing. The Almighty added another stab slowly, including wanting to keep me, taking off my clothes, and looking at my abs. Are these all appreciation? Hearing that, everyone's gaze on Fujio intensified. Uncle Yin Wuyao had an expression that said, "Little Captain, I didn't know you were such a lustful person. I really couldn't tell from the outside." The other members' gazes were even deeper. The way they looked at her was like they were looking at a pervert. However, the Almighty, who threw down such a huge bomb, still continued to walk forward with his straight posture. In fact, this was not Qin Mo's usual style. It was just that there were more than 20 people who confessed to him. Qin Mo narrowed his eyes. If he didn't do something about this, who knew what would pop up in the future to distract a certain someone's attention? He originally thought that the youngster only did those things and said those things in front of him. Now that he thought about it, how many people had he said those things to? In the past, he didn't care what Fujio was like. Even in the cafeteria, when the other party said that he liked him, wanted to keep him, and acted like he had money to spare, it had nothing to do with him. But now it was different. As long as Qin Mo thought about how the youngster had done similar things to others without his knowledge, he would feel very unhappy. He wasn't special. Was that what he meant? Fujio didn't know what Qin Mo was thinking. After all, after the Almighty turned around, she had an intuition that she wouldn't be able to clear her name even if she jumped into the Yellow River. As expected, Lin Feng came over and patted her shoulder. Then, he shook his head and said, "It's really been hard on you. You've been facing Captain every day for the past few days. It must have been hard on you, right? I understand everything. I'm the same towards girls I like. Sigh, I like them but I don't dare to admit it. But you're braver than your brother, you still know how to confess to Captain. But there's one thing we've talked about before, Captain really doesn't like guys, so little Spade, you should just give up. How about this, in order to not let you suffer so much, you shouldn't be in the same room with Captain tonight. Men really don't have good endurance in this aspect. Say, if you take things too hard and do something to Captain, he'll beat you up." With that, Lin Feng turned towards Qin Mo and shouted, "Captain, little Spade will sleep with me tonight." When Qin Mo heard this, he paused for a moment. Two faint words floated over. Up to him. Was he hallucinating? Why did Lin Feng feel that the captain was even more unhappy than before? Moreover, he seemed to be in a fit of pique with someone. Lin Feng raised his head again and looked at Qin Mo's back. Yeah, he was still very handsome and indifferent. He must have thought too much. The carefree Lin Feng reached out and put his arm over Fujio's shoulder. Hurry up and thank Big Brother. It's not good for men to endure for too long. I'm saving you from a disaster. Captain isn't that easy to sleep with, and you. TSK, it's so uncomfortable. Fujio glanced at him from the side and said leisurely, "You're right. It's not good for men to endure for too long. Aren't you afraid that I won't be able to sleep with Brother Mo and will settle for the next best thing and sleep with you? Lin Feng suddenly paused. His voice had been muted. After a while, he said again, "Little Spade, tell me clearly, what do you mean by settling for the next best thing? I only want to see Brother Mo's abs when he's like that." "You?" Fu Jiu laughed. "Do you have abs?" A critical hit, an absolute critical hit. Everyone knew that Lin Feng was only pretty, but not handsome. Fu Jiu shook her head and continued, "But it's also safe for me to sleep with you. If you don't have any thoughts, there's no question of whether you can endure it or not, so be happy." Lin Feng. How could he be happy with such a reason? What did she mean by, "It's safe for me to sleep with you"? He was so unattractive. He had also been pursued by a man in the past. Wait a minute, this didn't seem to be something to be proud of. What the f***ck, how should he reply to show his manliness? Obviously, Fu Jiu wouldn't give him a chance to fight back. She left after saying that. Lin Feng pointed at the youngster's back and looked at Yunhu. Unfortunately, Yunhu didn't pay attention to him this time. Instead, he walked straight past him. "Hey, what's going on?" Lin Feng had never been treated like this before. Someone said, "Brother Lin, you've always slept with Brother Yun. Today, you suddenly said that you're going to sleep with Little Spade. This isn't very appropriate." Lin Feng opened his mouth and wanted to refute. But after thinking about it carefully, he realized that he and Yun who were schoolmates from the same school. Back then, when they entered the Supreme Alliance, they did sleep together whenever there was such an activity. He suddenly became speechless. But the words had already been said. How could he retract it? Fu Jiu also agreed. After all, she wasn't sure if the Almighty would discover her secret in this situation. If they could avoid sleeping together, they wouldn't sleep together. With the Almighty's current mood, if he found out that she was a girl, he definitely wouldn't feel good. Moreover, that person had already made it very clear that he didn't like being lied to. Hence, when they were assigned rooms that day, Lin Feng and Fu Jiu were assigned to a room. Chapter 440. The night came so quickly that before he could react, the thick fog had already risen outside the window. It's cold outside. Other than Feng Yi, the agent, who had come to Lin City to attend a social event, the rest of the Supreme Alliance members would be resting in the hotel for tomorrow's competition. Fu Jiu had been looking for the Almighty to resolve the awkwardness, but who knew that when she went to the room, only Yunhu was there. The moment Yunhu opened the door and saw Fu Jiu, he didn't mind. Looking for Captain? Yeah. Fu Jiu didn't deny it. Yunhu rubbed his hair. He isn't here, he got a room alone. He's probably the only one who knows the room number. That would be difficult to find. After all, the hotel was so big. Fu Jiu lowered her eyes and thought about it. She could hack into the hotel's security system, but if she did that, the Almighty would notice something and she would have to explain herself. Forget it, I'll think about it after the competition tomorrow. With that thought in mind, Fu Jiu decided to leave. Unexpectedly, the moment she took a step, Yunhu spoke up. You can sleep in my room. When Fu Jiu heard that, she raised her eyebrows and looked at Yunhu with a meaningful gaze. Yunhu was very generous. He laughed. I don't want that guy to sleep with anyone other than me. Fu Jiu curled her lips. I understand, but he doesn't seem to understand your feelings for him. It's easier to act if you don't understand. After Yunhu finished speaking, he glanced at the youngster in front of him. When did you become gay? Fu Jiu really wanted to say that she wasn't gay. But Yunhu continued, I saw your confession previously. Fu Jiu didn't know what to do. She could only smile. You can think of it as one of my hobbies. Hobbies? After Yunhu packed his things, he looked at Fuzhou with a deep gaze. If it's a hobby, it depends on who the other party is. Some people shouldn't confess so casually. But I really admire you for being able to express your feelings in front of so many people without fear, even if the other party is also a man. Fuzhou. She really didn't want to accept this compliment. Who is the man you're talking about? She tried to recall that she had confessed to him. Yunhu frowned. I met Ling Xiao today. You seemed to like him a lot back then. Don't you remember? Fuzhou chuckled. Yunhu paused. That's good. Fuzhou raised her eyebrows. Looking at Yunhu, did she really have an affair with Ling Xiao? He's just toying with you. Everyone can see that. He just wants you to buy this and that. You have a lot of money anyway. Yunhu added another sentence. But it's weird, you seem different from before. At this point, Fuzhou decided to stop. I went to the hospital once, and it was my head that was hit. After I recovered, I became clear-headed. What happened in the past was because I had a hole in my brain. Yunhu nodded, looking as if he was glad that he knew. Chapter 441. However, after talking to Yunhu, Fuzhou was even more certain of one thing. That was, she couldn't attack the Almighty under his nose anymore. The reason why she hadn't been exposed yet was that the Almighty hadn't noticed her before. Even Yunhu, who didn't like to talk and only had eyes for Lin Feng, noticed that she was different from before. The Almighty must have noticed it too. Fuzhou's eyes paused. Sure enough, she couldn't use any means to check the Almighty's login information anymore. Sleep. Fuzhou told herself so. The Almighty was probably angry at her for confessing to her opponent. Tomorrow, she would be able to prove her innocence after torturing that Ling Xiao. At least, she could tell everyone that she wasn't gay. They were both in the north, but the haze in Lin City wasn't any less than that in Jiang City. Qi Nemo stood in the newly opened room and pulled open his collar. When he picked up the wine glass and looked down at the traffic, he realized for the first time that a room with floor-to-ceiling windows was so empty. It was so empty that he felt bored. Bored? He would never have felt this way before. But now, he felt that there was no point in doing anything. Perhaps it was because there wasn't a youngster beside him who needed to be taught a lesson. Qi Nemo tilted his head and lit a cigarette. He held it between his fingers and didn't smoke it. Anyone who saw him now would feel that he was manly and domineering. But when he looked out of the window without moving his fingers, and his hair fell down, he gave off an indescribable sense of sexy loneliness. Qi Nemo reached out and flicked the cigarette away. He walked to the side of the bed and inadvertently touched the mask in his trouser pocket. His gaze paused again. That mask wasn't special. It was very ordinary, pure black, without any patterns. But that touch still warmed the coldness in Qi Mo's eyes a little. That guy wasn't completely heartless. He looked lazy, but when he cared about someone, it made people feel comfortable. And when he was depressed, he would hang his head, and a few strands of his silver hair would stand up. That guy didn't even notice it. That guy. When Qi Nemo found that the youngster's face kept appearing in his mind, his heart suddenly went numb. That feeling was very faint. It was so faint that when the phone rang, he quickly put it aside. The caller ID on the screen was very familiar. Qi Nemo placed the phone to his ear. Hello. Son. The person on the other end of the phone seemed to be in a good mood. You have a competition tomorrow, right? How was it? Do you want me to go over and help you increase your popularity? Qi Nemo turned and lay on the bed. There's no need. The indifferent words made the caller pause. According to his son's personality, he would definitely say, "Where is Mr. Chin? Tell him to watch over you and don't come out to provoke reporters." But today, he just calmly said that there was no need. The elegant movie queen paused for a moment and gestured for the people behind her to stop. Then, she lifted her long dress with one hand and walked to the makeup mirror. "Son, what's wrong with you today? Why is your voice so low?" "Nothing," Chin Mo replied and was about to hang up the phone. Chapter 442. When Chin Mo heard this, his fingers paused. In the end, he didn't say anything. He only replied with a faint voice, "He's not here." He swiped the screen and closed his eyes. He wasn't in a good mood because the other party didn't treat him as a special person. As soon as he thought of this, it was as if a hole had opened up in his chest. There was an indescribable bitterness. Chin Mo had never felt this way since he was young. It was probably because he had obtained too many things. Some things did not develop according to his expectations, which was why this happened. Chin Mo didn't know why. Perhaps he was used to it. He glanced at the WeChat on his phone. He recalled the expression on the young man's face when he didn't allow him to play with electronic devices. He was so depressed that he looked like a withered tiger. But now that she wasn't by his side, he felt that it was meaningless to look at WeChat like this. However, there was news from the higher-ups. They were all unimportant things. Chin Mo tilted his head. He couldn't fall asleep, as if he was looking for something. He opened the mobile app of Hero and logged in. There were a lot of people using WeChat to play Hero, and many of their avatars were lit up. Only Spade Z's avatar was gray. It seemed like a certain someone knew how to behave now. However, what was that fellow doing now? He shouldn't be sleeping so early. When she realized that she was thinking of the youngster again, she felt a chill run down her spine. Chin Mo's beautiful brows furrowed deeply. On the other side, the elegant movie queen looked at her phone that had been hung up. Her beautiful fingertips touched her lips. That action was very beautiful, especially when she tilted her head and talked to herself. Oldly, why do I always feel that there is a little bit of resentment in my son's tone? Am I thinking too much? Don't worry about me. Madam, young master shouldn't blame anyone. Manager Lee, who stayed behind to take care of the movie queen on behalf of the boss, gave a flawless answer. The movie queen nodded. That was indeed the case. She knew very well that her son was still the same in front of her. However, what was with that moment of gloominess? The movie queen couldn't figure it out either. He simply made a decision. I'll fly back to China tomorrow to cheer for my son. Manager Lee paused. Madam, young master always speaks with his ability. You should know that if it's to cheer for him, it's better for you to stay in Milan. After all, you have a fashion show the day after tomorrow, and the boss has already booked a plane ticket here. If it's for other reasons, well, I just want to see who his pillow is. The elegant movie queen said frankly, you don't know your young master's tone just now. It's obvious that he's unhappy because his bolster isn't around. I know my son a little. Manager Lee didn't know what kind of pillow would make his young master unhappy. But according to Madam, that bolster was a human. All right, hurry up and book the plane tickets. Who knows, you might be able to see your young master compete tomorrow. I played 2 rounds of Hero a while ago, and I'll play another one later. There's a god carrying me. When Manager Lee heard this, he thought to himself, Madam, young master is a god among gods. Who exactly did you find to carry you? Does the boss know about this? Speaking up to this point, the movie queen seemed to have thought of something. She swiped her phone and showed him the screen. Look, it's this person, Spade Z, but he doesn't let me add him as a friend. I heard he's also from our Chin group, so I can go meet him. You're tuning into the Journey of the Soul YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.